Before we dive into today's powerful story, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Your thoughts matter. Your stories matter. And here at True Echo, we believe in amplifying voices that have been silenced for far too long. Now, sit back and prepare for a story that exposes injustice, challenges power, and reveals what happens when the truth refuses to stay buried. The summer heat in Savannah clung to the air like a second skin, dense, heavy, and impossible to ignore. Nestled between a rundown liquor store and an auto shop with sagging gutters sat a beige, one-story building with flaking paint and broken blinds. It looked forgotten by the city. But inside, Monroe Industries hummed on like any other remote branch office, silent cubicles, sputtering vending machines, and employees numbing themselves with routine. Among the new hires that Monday was a woman no one paid much attention to. Her ID badge simply read, A. Monroe, and she introduced herself as Alyssa. Dressed in neutral khakis and a tucked-in polo shirt, she was slim, quiet, and clearly didn't fit in, not because of what she wore, but because of how she carried herself. She walked like someone used to power but pretending not to have it. No one realized the young woman quietly taking notes in the break room was Alyssa Monroe, the sole heir to the Monroe corporate empire. In 2 weeks, she would become the youngest chairwoman in company history. But today, she was just another intern assigned to help with supplies. Alyssa had no interest in starting her reign with champagne and speeches. She wanted to see the truth with her own eyes. Not from a boardroom but from the floor. She'd chosen this forgotten branch for a reason. If something was broken in the company, it would show its cracks here, at the bottom. In her first week, she learned more than she expected. It started when she asked to use the restroom near the break room. A white employee, Cole, looked confused, then offered an awkward smile and pointed down the hall. Not that one. Try the other one, near the dock. He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. The other restroom was a closet with a flickering bulb, mildew on the floor, and a mop leaning against the wall like a warning. Alyssa stood inside for a long minute, staring at herself in the cracked mirror. Gone was the polished image from corporate meetings. This version of herself was invisible. Later that same day, she reached for a styrofoam coffee cup. "That's for staff only," barked a voice behind her. Harlan Prescott. Mid-50s. Tie too tight. Gut too big. Name tag flashing operations manager. His face wore a permanent sneer of authority. "Interns don't count," he said, sipping his own coffee with smug satisfaction. Alyssa gave no reaction, retreating silently to her desk. But inside, something hardened. In just days, she noticed a chilling pattern. Black employees were given the worst shifts, the heaviest loads, and no clear path to promotion. Comments weren't shouted, they were whispered. Quiet jokes about diversity hires, eye rolls when someone mentioned fairness. It wasn't a broken culture. It was engineered. She saw Marcus, a black employee with a master's degree, scrubbing tables while a white temp shadowed a junior executive. She overheard supervisors mocking HR's inclusion metrics, like they were buzzwords, not lives. Alyssa knew she needed more than just observation, she needed proof. The next Monday, Alyssa arrived before sunrise. The air was cooler but charged with tension, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. She wore the same dull uniform, the same badge. But this time, in her pocket was a small voice recorder, no larger than a lipstick tube. Hidden beneath a tissue, it clicked on with a soft snap the moment she stepped through the front doors. The building woke up in lazy spurts. Staff shuffled in with half-laced shoes and lukewarm coffee. Alyssa moved quietly, never drawing attention. She had become an expert at invisibility, at blending in just enough to go unnoticed but close enough to hear what mattered. For 3 days, nothing significant happened. Most of the racism and bias lived in silences, in smirks, in jokes that were always just barely out of range. But Alyssa was patient. She memorized patterns, when Carol liked to berate junior staff, when Harlan would hold his pep talks in the back office with newer hires. She followed the tension like a bloodhound. Then it happened. She was restocking toner cartridges in the copy room when she heard Harlan's voice drift from his office, sharp, arrogant, unfiltered. No, no. I don't care what her resume says. She's here to clean. That's what we use them for. Alyssa froze. You think corporate checks these things? They just want some color for their annual report. It's a quota, nothing more. Play the game and you'll be fine. He was talking to Jake, a new white intern, still green and nervous. Harlan's voice was thick with entitlement, like he was bestowing a secret. The worst part wasn't just what he said, it was how casual he was. Like this wasn't shameful. It was just business. The recorder caught it all. That night, Alyssa replayed the audio again and again in her apartment, her jaw clenched. It was no longer just prejudice. It was policy, disguised under corporate jargon. They were hiring black interns to fill out a diversity spreadsheet, then discarding them after they'd served their visual purpose. It wasn't just unethical. It was calculated. Over the next few days, she escalated her operation. She traded her recorder for a discreet pen camera sewn into her badge. She took pictures of timesheets, HR logs, task assignments. She tracked pay discrepancies. Marcus, who held 2 degrees and managed janitorial logistics, was listed in the system as part-time maintenance support. His pay was 22% lower than that of a white high school graduate hired a week ago. More damning than numbers were the off-the-book tasks. Alyssa asked Marcus during lunch, "What's miscellaneous duty on your schedule?" He chuckled bitterly. Could be anything. Babysitting Harlan's kid, mowing his yard, picking up dry cleaning. Once, Carol had me drive her mom to the podiatrist. Said it counted as community outreach. She blinked. Did they reimburse you? Marcus gave her a sad grin. They barely thanked me. Each night, Alyssa organized her evidence, clips, screenshots, files, and audio. The deeper she dug, the clearer the pattern became. This wasn't neglect. It was design. A quiet but persistent machinery of racism, powered by fear and silence. But it wasn't until she found the file cabinet that her case turned airtight. One Friday night, long after most staff had left, Alyssa lingered near the supply room. She had memorized the camera angles. Harlan's office was unlocked, the door cracked open. Inside, she moved with surgical precision. The drawer labeled Personnel, Diversity Initiatives was full of spreadsheets and quarterly memos. One sheet titled Diversity Reporting, Q2 showed glowing numbers, black hires up 18%, Latino interns doubled, progress across the board. But the promotion column told a darker story. Zero upward mobility. Dozens of names, black, Latinx, were listed as temporary/rotation, with notes like, not a fit for long-term leadership. Then she saw it. Her name. A. Monroe, cleaning, no path, probationary. Her stomach churned. Below that was the final drawer. Inside was a handwritten ledger. A quiet list of names and off-the-record tasks, yard work. Errands. Babysitting. Car detailing. Reimbursement, TBD, use petty cash or community budget if audit flags. She closed the drawer carefully. Her heart thundered, but her steps were calm. She had everything. That night, Alyssa didn't sleep. She organized her files. Created backups. One for legal. One for PR. One for the board. But she wasn't ready to reveal herself yet. The setting had to be right. Public. Unavoidable. Then it came, a staff-wide email for the quarterly review meeting. And just like that, the trap was set. The envelope had been slipped into her locker without ceremony. White, corporate, unassuming. But to Alyssa, it was the final signal. The quarterly review meeting, a routine gathering where regional leadership visited remote branches to pat backs, review stats, and make hollow promises. Interns were rarely invited. Which meant someone had taken notice. Good. The night before the meeting, her apartment was silent but alive with preparation. Alyssa sat at her small kitchen table surrounded by flash drives, documents, and her open laptop. She replayed each video, checked every timestamp, and organized it all into one seamless presentation. There would be no denying it. No way to spin this as misunderstanding. Still, she wasn't without fear. If she revealed herself too early, it could all be dismissed. If she waited too long, she might be silenced. Timing was everything. She practiced her words in the mirror. Measured. Calm. Not vindictive, but unshakable. She wasn't just fighting a manager, she was exposing a lie that had hollowed out her family's company from within. When she finally slept, it was with one phrase echoing in her mind, "Make it undeniable." The next morning, the air buzzed with tension. Monroe Industries' remote Savannah branch had never hosted senior executives before. Employees rushed to tidy up, clean break rooms, reprint signs. Harlan Prescott strutted through the hallways like a man preparing for coronation, his grin wider than usual, his tie knotted tighter. He passed Alyssa without a glance. She arrived early, dressed in the same polo and khakis, still wearing her intern badge. The conference room filled slowly. Nervous laughter. Phones silenced. Coffee brewed. Board members arrived in sharp suits, already looking bored. Harlan stood confidently near the projector, clipboard in hand, rehearsing his opening lines. Alyssa took a seat near the back. The presentation began. Numbers. Charts. Bland applause. Harlan praised team efforts, winked at Carol during a joke about keeping interns in line, and highlighted the branch's diversity growth. Alyssa felt a slow burn rise in her chest. Then came the open floor segment. Anyone have something to share? Harlan said, clearly expecting silence. But Alyssa stood. The room stilled. She walked slowly toward the front. Not rushed. Not angry. Measured. "I'd like to speak," she said calmly, her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. "But first, a proper introduction." She pulled her badge from around her neck and placed it on the table. Then she met every eye in the room, including the board's. "My name is Alyssa Monroe." Gasps. Audible gasps. "I'm not just an intern. I'm the future chairwoman of Monroe Industries. My grandfather built this company. My mother sustained it. And I came here undercover to see what it had become." The silence was now electric. Harlan blinked. His face paled. He opened his mouth but said nothing. "I wanted to know if our values were still alive. I wanted to see how our employees, especially our black and brown employees, were treated. What I found," she continued, "is a culture of exploitation, discrimination, and abuse of power." She turned to the projector. Click. The screen lit up with the first clip, Harlan's voice, laughing, "She's here to clean. That's what we use them for." Gasps. A woman near the front dropped her pen. Click. Carol's voice, mocking Tiana for asking to use the staff microwave. Click. Spreadsheets of fake promotions. Pay disparities. Timesheets altered. Photos of Marcus mowing Harlan's lawn. Click. The handwritten ledger. Personal tasks. Petty cash. Compensate without triggering audit. Harlan was motionless now. A statue. No smirk. No bravado. Alyssa stepped forward. This wasn't ignorance. It was strategy. A system built on silence and power imbalance. Mr. Prescott abused his position. He humiliated employees, exploited their labor, and manipulated the system for personal gain. She turned to the board. As of this moment, I have initiated formal legal action. Civil and criminal complaints are being filed. Mr. Prescott is officially terminated. 2 security guards entered quietly, flanking the back of the room. Harlan finally spoke, voice cracking. You can't be serious. I've never been more serious in my life," Alyssa interrupted. The guards moved toward him. He didn't resist. He just looked around at the faces now refusing to meet his eyes. Then, to Alyssa. "You lied to everyone," he said, a last flicker of arrogance. "I told the truth. You just never listened long enough to hear it." He was escorted out. The elevator doors closed with a soft thud. The room stayed quiet for a full minute. Then someone clapped. Then another. Then it spread, like thunder breaking through clouds. But Alyssa didn't bask in the applause. She stood still, hands steady, eyes scanning the room. This wasn't the end. It was the reckoning. As the applause subsided and the echoes faded into the thick stillness of the conference room, Alyssa stood composed, her hands calmly folded in front of her. No smile. No celebration. Just clarity. Because what she had done wasn't about personal triumph, it was about restoring something that had been lost, accountability. She turned to the employees, many of whom were still too stunned to speak. Their eyes, once dulled by routine and resignation, now flickered with something new, hope, disbelief, maybe even a cautious pride. "I know this is a lot to take in," she said gently. "But let me be very clear, this is only the beginning." A murmur rippled through the crowd as she continued. "I've authorized an immediate investigation into labor practices across all departments. HR is being restructured. Every complaint, every violation, every ignored report will be reviewed." She turned back to the board members. Their faces were unreadable, some impressed, some rattled. "We're also hiring an independent oversight committee, external and untouchable by internal influence. And for those who've been overlooked, underpaid, or mistreated, you will be compensated." It wasn't a promise of perfection. It was a promise of change. Later that day, Alyssa met privately with HR, compliance, and the legal team. She reviewed employee files line by line. Every discrepancy Marcus had described, every miscellaneous duty logged under fake job codes, was investigated. Carol was suspended pending investigation. Jake, the young intern who had sat in that office nodding nervously while Harlan spoke about using them, came forward privately. He brought texts, emails, and voice messages from Harlan, more fuel to the fire. "I didn't know what to do," Jake admitted, guilt heavy in his voice. "He said if I kept quiet, I'd get fast-tracked for a promotion." "I'm sorry." "You were afraid," Alyssa said simply. "But the moment you decided to speak, you became part of the solution." Behind closed doors, the legal department worked non-stop. By evening, a press release was ready. Alyssa approved it personally. Effective immediately, Monroe Industries has terminated operations manager Harlan Prescott for workplace discrimination, labor abuse, and systemic fraud. The company will pursue full legal action and is launching a sweeping reform across all branches to ensure a workplace built on dignity, equity, and accountability. The story spread fast. The Savannah branch became the focus of headlines nationwide. Some called it corporate comeuppance. Others simply called it justice. The next morning, Alyssa stood in front of a camera. No teleprompter. No executive branding. She addressed every Monroe Industries employee across the nation. "My name is Alyssa Monroe. Many of you know me by name, but until now, few of you have seen me walk your hallways or feel your silence. I went undercover at one of our smallest branches to learn the truth, and what I found broke my heart." She paused. I didn't find a failure in numbers or productivity. I found a failure in people. A failure to see one another. To hear one another. She laid out the reforms, real reforms. Anonymous reporting systems. External equity boards. Automatic audits when discrimination claims were filed. Fair pay reviews across every level. No one should have to shrink to fit a space they've already earned, she concluded. And no one should fear retaliation for speaking up. We are better than this. We must be better than this. The video went viral within hours. Internally, it sparked a revolution. Across Monroe Industries, employees began speaking up. Stories came in, some old, some recent. Some heartbreaking, others furious. But every voice mattered. Alyssa made sure of it. She created a direct inbox just for employee concerns, no assistants, no filters. She read them herself. One email simply read. "Thank you for seeing us. For walking beside us." It was signed, Marcus. The days that followed the boardroom revelation blurred into a flurry of meetings, press inquiries, and personnel restructuring. But through it all, Alyssa remained grounded. She didn't delegate the cleanup, she led it. Personally. At the Savannah branch, employees who once walked with their heads low began standing straighter. The energy shifted. Whispered apologies floated in hallways. Smiles became more genuine. It wasn't utopia, but something had cracked open, a door to possibility. 1 week later, Alyssa returned to the branch. No longer disguised. No khakis. No plain polo. She wore a sharp navy blue suit and heels that clicked confidently on the once ignored linoleum. Her name badge now read in bold, Chairwoman Alyssa Monroe. This time, when she entered the building, people looked up. Some stared. Some whispered. But no one dismissed her. Marcus was in the break room, organizing supply inventory. When he saw her, his eyes widened. "I almost didn't recognize you," he said, stunned. "I almost didn't recognize myself," Alyssa replied with a soft laugh. He stood awkwardly for a moment, his hands still gripping the clipboard. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to," she said gently. "You've already said enough, just by showing up every day." She meant it. The quiet strength of people like Marcus, Tiana, and others who endured not because they were weak, but because they had no choice, that was the real legacy of Monroe Industries. Not profit margins. Not growth charts. She held a short, informal staff meeting. No cameras. No PowerPoint. Just people. Alyssa invited anyone to speak. Some vented. Some cried. Some simply nodded in gratitude. One janitor, an older woman named Ruth, raised her hand. "I've worked here 17 years. I stopped believing anyone up top cared. I've seen managers come and go, all smiling for newsletters. But no one ever listened. Until you." Alyssa blinked back emotion. "I'm listening now. And I won't stop." That afternoon, she walked through the building room by room, pausing at each workstation, asking names, listening to stories. She met the receptionist who once offered her a ride home in the rain. The forklift driver who had to bring his own bottled water because the cooler was locked behind the main office door. The single mother who said being able to speak without fear made her feel human again. At the end of the day, she stood at the front doors. Sunlight streamed in, bathing the worn floors in gold. Alyssa looked back once more, not at the building, but at the people inside. They were still working, still organizing, still living, but they were different now. Brighter. As she stepped outside, her phone buzzed. It was an email from corporate legal. The civil suit against Harlan had officially been filed. His assets frozen. Internal audits confirmed illegal labor practices. He would not walk away untouched. And more importantly, no one else would suffer in silence again. Alyssa inhaled the savanna air, still humid, still heavy, but this time, it didn't feel oppressive. It felt full. Full of potential. Full of truth. And finally, justice. The following Monday, Monroe Industries broadcast a second live message, this time not from a boardroom, but from the very branch where it all began. Alyssa stood beneath a simple white banner that read, "Restoring Trust Starts Here." No script. No formality. Just her and a microphone. "Some people said I could have handled this quietly," she began. "That exposing what happened here might hurt the brand. But silence never protected the right people. It only protects the abusers." The audience, both in person and across hundreds of branch live feeds, hung on her every word. This isn't just about Harlan Prescott. This is about what happens when we stop seeing the people behind the titles. When we reduce human beings to line items on a diversity report. She paused, eyes scanning the room. "When I came here undercover, I didn't just see injustice, I felt it. I lived it. I was ignored, insulted, denied access to a basic restroom. And I wasn't even the worst treated person here." That line struck a nerve. "I walked your hallways. I scrubbed your floors. I ate lunch alone. I heard things you were all too used to hearing. I learned what it meant to carry the weight of someone else's assumptions, and I will never forget it." She held up a new company document, simple, white, and stamped with her seal. "This is the Employee Bill of Dignity. It's not symbolic. It's enforceable. No employee can be asked to perform off-the-record labor. No intern will be denied mentorship. All promotions will be audited quarterly by a third party." Gasps. Then claps. Alyssa continued. "There's a hotline. There's a task force. There's funding behind it all. But most importantly, there is someone at the top who knows what it feels like to be at the bottom." The crowd erupted into real applause, not polite, not staged. This was gratitude wrapped in release. Later that day, Alyssa walked the corridors again, not as an observer, but as herself. Employees pulled her aside to thank her, to share stories, to ask if she really meant what she said. She told them yes. Because truth, once spoken aloud, cannot be unsaid. And justice, once pursued, doesn't stop halfway. At headquarters, her reforms began to reshape the entire company culture. The Savannah incident was not covered up, it was made the cornerstone of a new training initiative, the Monroe Standard. Senior executives were required to review Alyssa's footage. Every manager across the country had to watch the boardroom presentation. A company once proud of its image was learning to be proud of its people. Months passed. Employee satisfaction rose 22%. Lawsuits dropped. Whistleblower reports surged, because for the first time, people believed someone would actually listen. And every Monday morning, Alyssa began her week reading those reports. She didn't flinch at the hard stories. She welcomed them. Because silence had been the real enemy all along. 3 months later, Monroe Industries looked nothing like the company it had been before Alyssa Monroe slipped through the back door of its most neglected branch. What had once been a corporate giant coasting on legacy was now becoming something else entirely, a company reckoning with itself, recalibrating its soul. But for Alyssa, the journey wasn't over. Her work had only just begun. She returned to the Savannah branch on a rainy Friday morning, dressed in business casual and holding only a slim leather notebook. No press. No announcement. She asked for no fanfare. She simply walked through the same doors that had once closed behind her like a prison gate. Inside, the building buzzed differently now. The front office had been repainted, the old coffee machine replaced, and the restrooms unlocked. Equal. Clean. A small sign near the hallway now read, "Every employee deserves respect." She found Marcus in the same break room, now brighter, cleaner, louder with laughter. He looked up and smiled. You came back. I said I would. He set down his coffee and walked over, hesitating only briefly before pulling her into a quick, firm hug. You changed everything. Alyssa shook her head. We did. You showed up. You spoke up. He looked down, his voice softer now. There was a time I thought, none of this would ever matter. I know. That's why I did it this way. That afternoon, Alyssa called a quiet meeting with the branch staff, not to lead, but to listen. People shared things they'd never said aloud before. Tiana spoke about being asked to clean a supervisor's house during her lunch break. A maintenance tech described how he was always sent outside to work, no matter the heat index. And for the first time, every word was heard. No defensiveness. No dismissal. Just truth. When the meeting ended, Alyssa stood by the door, shaking hands as employees left the room. No title between them now. Just mutual respect. As she stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving steam rising from the pavement. A golden light broke through the clouds, subtle but beautiful. She turned to look at the building one last time. This wasn't about a company anymore. It wasn't even about justice. It was about restoring something bigger, human dignity. And for Alyssa Monroe, that mission was now a lifelong one. Because legacy isn't what you leave in the vault. It's what you build in the hearts of people who thought they'd been forgotten. What does it mean to lead with truth? For Alyssa Monroe, it meant stepping down from the mountaintop to walk among those forgotten at the base, and lifting them with her. Let her story remind us, justice delayed is still justice delivered, if we choose to act. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes, we want to hear from you. Drop a comment, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to True Echo for more stories that cut through silence with purpose. Your voice is powerful. Let's use it together.